so much for joining us here at The Research Her, the show working to improve the health disparities for women of color, one topic at a time. I am Alicia. I'm here learning and growing with you as we research our way to well-being. Today, we will be discussing with another one of our great sisters, okay? Let me tell you, she is bomb, queen status, everything. We have Dr. Ijeoma Opara on the podcast. Dr. Opara got her PhD in Family Science and Human Development at Mount Clair State University. And our great sis doesn't just have one, but two masters. One is a Master of Social Work from New York University, and the other is a Master of Public Health and Epidemiology at New York Medical College. And she also received her Bachelor of Arts from New Jersey City University. Currently, Dr. Opara is a professor at Stony Brook University School of Social Welfare and a visiting faculty at Yale University School of Public Health. Dr. Opara also directs a consulting agency that offers training from youth community-based organizations, companies, and schools on various topics related to substance use prevention, sexual health, and more. So get into this conversation. Today, we have Dr. Ijeoma Opara, and I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Like, I can't even express it enough.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so awesome.
So I like to start off the episodes with just quick little icebreakers, and we need to get through them quick because our great sis is a busy woman, but I still wanted us to warm up and get to know each other, have some fun questions. So the first one is, what food do you wish were calorie-free?
Definitely macaroni and cheese.
Yes.
And pancakes.
Oh,
love pancakes, yeah. And Oreos. I love Oreos.
So one of the three, what's the top?
The top? Oreos.
Okay, Oreos.
Yeah.
Boom. Because you can just pop one real quick and keep it pushing.
You can mix it with ice cream. That's what I usually do, mix it with ice cream.
Me too. Okay. So then, what is the last song or podcast that you've listened to?
I'll go with song. And the last song was actually Drake called D4L. The last song I was listening to. Okay.
And thank you for sharing with us. I mean, I have beef with a lot of celebrities because of Drake, so I completely understand. Obviously, they don't know who I am, but I love Drake as well.
Drake so much. It's so funny because normally I listen to Christian music in the morning, but for some reason this morning I was just bumping Drake.
So did little baby Dr. Ijeoma know that she would get her PhD in Family Science and Human Development?
No, absolutely not. I was one of those kids that wanted to be everything. I knew I wanted to be great, but I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to be. I would go through moments in my life where I wanted to be a lawyer. And my parents and just people that meet me often always tell me, you should be a lawyer, because I'm really good at advocating and arguing, proving a point. I'm really good at that, and writing. So I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a medical doctor. I wanted to be like a computer engineer. I've literally, almost any profession you could think of, I wanted to be it. And I really did. And then just life in itself. I think what happens is just going through life and just going through different experiences and how those experiences kind of like shaped me and kind of built and showed me what my true passion was. That's what led me to be in the career that I am. And I really am so thankful for that. And it just kind of shows how things in your life when you're younger may not seem to make sense, but it's for a purpose. At least for me, I'm a very religious and spiritual person. So I felt like I really allowed God to lead my life and kind of guide my footsteps. And because I did that, I really do feel like I'm in the right place that I was meant to be in. I'm in the right fields, and I'm really happy and grateful for that. So I learned just through life to just trust the process.
Mm-hmm. Did God give you parents who also played roles in developing your idea of what you wanted to do and what you saw yourself doing in the future?
Yes, my parents were Nigerian immigrants. And one of the things about my dad, who passed away, both my parents passed away when I was younger. My mom passed away when I was in high school from complications from diabetes, and my dad passed away after I graduated college from complications from diabetes. He had a heart attack. And one of the things that my dad always told me was that, look, you can be whatever you want to be, I'm not going to tell you what field you should get into, because most Nigerian families will tell you that oftentimes, like, our parents then want us to be like medical doctors, lawyers, engineers. Those are like the three professions that Nigerians are kind of get pushed to. But my father wasn't like that. My dad was like, you know what? If you want to be a journalist, an artist, a musician, or whatever you want to be it, but be the best at it. Go for the highest degree possible. Be the expert at it. Because if you're the expert at something, you will never be broke. You'll never lack. And that was something that guided me just all through life. So I knew that I was going to get a terminal degree. I just didn't know in what. And just by following the advice that my dad and my mom gave me, because neither of them had doctorates. My mom had a bachelor's degree in education. My dad had a master's in criminal justice. So being able to just achieve a PhD was like a dream of theirs, and unfortunate that they weren't able to see me walk across the stage, but I know that they were in my hearts. But their voices and their words of encouragement just from when I was a child till now was really what pushed me to believe in myself and know that I can be the best at something. And I'm still trying to continue to be the best at my field and everything I do.
And the best you are. Let's talk about what led you to getting your bachelor's of art. First, you got a bachelor's of art from New Jersey City University.
Yeah, so it's in psychology. So backtrack. So most people don't know, I actually started out at a community college. So I started off doing an associate of arts in psychology at Union County College in New Jersey. And one of the reasons why I did that was because my last year of high school, my mom passed away. And then also I realized with working with my guidance counselor that there were certain classes that I was supposed to take to be able to get into a 4-year school. But my guidance counselor told me I didn't have to take those classes. And then once I was applying for the schools that I really wanted to get into and I wasn't getting in, he was like, oops, I just realized that you're supposed to take these classes and you didn't take it. So, it was kind of like one of those things where I just decided, you know what, since I'm not able to get into the school that I really want to, and a lot of the schools that I would have been able to get into were really far away, I wanted to stay close to home. I wanted to be close to my dad and my brother at the time. And so I decided to stay close to home. But then also I wanted to go to a college that was affordable, because my dad was going through a lot with, he's buried my mom and, now he's a single parent. And I was one of those children that were always very considerate of finances and struggles that parents go through. But because of that experience in high school, with my guidance counselor, it really kind of shaped me to be this person that was always on top of everybody, always on top of anything that had to do with me and my schedule and my future. So I never allowed people to kind of dictate what classes I should take, what I should do. I'm always on top of that.
I just want to take it a step back because I might be missing it. You're saying that you allowed your guidance counselor or your school counselor to make your schedule, right? And when that counselor was in charge of schedule, they did not give you the courses that you needed in order to get into a 4-year university. Yeah. And with that, you said, oh, wow, I should have taken responsibility in that case. I will never allow this to happen again.
Absolutely. Because I think if I could do it all over again, I would have actually taken a step back and actually researched the colleges that I wanted to go to and found out what courses were required to get into those schools. But I didn't do that. I trusted my guidance counselor. My parents didn't really know any better. They were immigrants, so they didn't really know the whole process of taking the SATs and applying for colleges. They just figured, all right, just apply for a college and, you'll get in and that's it. Your school will take care of all that. So I don't necessarily blame them totally. And I don't even really blame my guidance counselor totally. I feel like I should have taken more responsibility. And that's kind of how I've been able to plan my life out. I'm a planner. So I like to plan things and be in control of things instead of letting people take that control away from me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Do you think that your experience first going to a junior college really helped you in your bachelor's program? Or do you think you would have been as prepared coming right out of high school as you were, since you had buffer, I would say, in between going to a 4-year university in high school?
So I went to a really great community college. I had great professors who really saw my potential and really invested in me. And then just going into that junior college, I realized my plan actually was to do really well, get a really high GPA so that I can get a full scholarship to transfer to a 4-year school. And that's exactly what happened because I planned it. I planned it out my first year. Yeah. So I planned it out my first year of community college and so forth. So I do think that just being in a community college, it did serve as like a buffer a little bit as to kind of like help me to transition between high school and a 4-year school, because I went to 3 different high schools. Because I grew up in Jersey City. I don't know if you're familiar with Jersey City, New Jersey.
Not at all.
Yeah, so it's like a predominantly like urban environment. I went to they're considered 2 of the worst high schools in New Jersey. And I went to one school, transferred, went to another different school. And then from that school, I then moved to Roselle, which is like a suburban area in New Jersey. And then I finished out my last year in Roselle. And although Roselle was great at preparing their students to go to college, because I missed that critical like freshman to like junior year, as a senior, I was just kind of trying to play catch up with everybody else. Like everyone had taken their SATs. People were prepping for their SATs like in 8th, 9th grade. And I was looking at them like, wait, you have to study for your SATs? Like I had no idea, you know? Like, I had no idea how this worked. Because in the previous high schools that I went to, the biggest accomplishment was just getting through high school without getting arrested. There was no expectation placed on us to even graduate high school and go to college. Like that wasn't even like something that they even talked about. And if you did, it was like, okay, great, you went to college, but it wasn't like an expectation as opposed to the school I graduated from where everybody went to college. You know, like it was just a normal thing to just, okay, from high school you go to college. So I do think that because I wasn't necessarily prepared, I feel like I did have really good work ethic. And I think the community college kind of gave me this practice to really prepare myself for these rigorous courses so that when I transfer into the four-year school, I'm ready. And that's really what happened. I was able to transfer. I got into 4 different four-year colleges, all with scholarships. And I chose New Jersey City University because it was a full presidential scholarship and got in and I did really well, thankfully, and, you know, I graduated within 2 years. And I majored in psychology because at the time, my goal was to be a psychologist because I really loved being able to work with people. I really loved being able to talk to people. At the time, being a psychologist, when I was taking my psychology courses and actually talking to professors of psychology, I started to realize that, maybe psychology really isn't for me because it seems so research heavy. And it seemed like a lot of psychologists that I was being taught by, they were already doing a lot of clinical work. So I wasn't really sure. I then started getting confused. Like, I'm not really sure if this is. Yeah. So I moved from there. I kind of moved into law school. I applied to a bunch of law schools. I applied to law schools and masters of public health programs because I was really interested in health and prevention and just understanding the study of diseases and so forth.
Okay, so wait, let's not just pretend like there aren't these examinations that you got to take to go to grad school and these things. Okay, so let's just take it back. You're preparing for law school, but you also preparing for masters in public health. So those are 2 completely different programs. So are you telling me that you took the LSAT and you took the GRE, or how does that look?
So for my master's program, I didn't have to take the GRE. GRE was waived. You had a certain GPA, but I was studying for the LSAT. So I took the LSAT twice in my senior year of college. Took the LSAT twice, took an LSAT prep program, but I still didn't really do that well. I forgot what my score was, but it wasn't like a high score to get me into like a top 10 law school. And that's what I do.
Oh, and I know that, yes. And you were like, no top 10, no me. You won't.
Exactly. I was like, I ain't doing it. So, but that was mainly, you know, and I mean, looking back on it, I did get into law schools, but like I said, I think I'm exactly where I wanted to be. I think I need to go through that just because maybe law wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I was probably meant to do, but I didn't get into any of the top 10 law schools that I really wanted to go to, but I did get into master's programs. So I chose the MPH program, that MPH.
Epidemiology at New York Medical College. So at what point did you realize, though, that you wanted to pursue the master's over law school? I know that one of the big things is that you didn't get into the top 10 programs, but I mean, most people would have said, you know what, well, I'm going to go to where they accepted me and I'm going to make the most out of it because boom. But instead you said, you know what? I have a feeling that this other route is the one that I'm supposed to take. And what was that gut feeling for you?
A couple of things. One, when I was applying for law school, one of the things that I cared about was health. I wanted to be a lawyer, like a health policy lawyer. So I was always interested in health and chronic diseases. So I wanted to figure out a way to be a lawyer in like the health setting. So that's why public health wasn't too far-fetched for me, because I knew that health was something that I wanted to do in my career. Like, I think one of the main things that pushed me to going into an MPH was the location, was the proximity. So the MPH program I got into was close to my house.
How far is that? Maybe 2 hours or so?
It's like an hour from my house. And one of the things is that I had responsibilities growing up. So because my mom passed away I do have an older brother who's autistic. So I was kind of like responsible for him. So it was me, my brother, and my dad. And my dad was always at work. So I knew that I had to be close to home so that I could be able to be there for my brother and then also my dad. So I knew that going to school out of state, like out of like New York, New Jersey area, was just out the question. I just couldn't do that. And a lot of the law schools that I was able to get into were like in other states. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, all right, maybe this is God telling me this is not for me. Because I'm a believer that if God wants you, at least for me, if God wants me to do something, he makes it very clear. He opens up doors for me and like he just does that for me. So I just knew like, all right, this is not really working out. This track is not working out for me. And I'm going to focus more on the public health track. I think that if I was really meant to be a lawyer, trust me, I probably would have ended up at Harvard. Or I would have had that passion to just say, you know what, I'm going to apply to law school again. You know, I'm good. Like some people just have that in them where they just don't give up. I didn't have that when it came to law. I just decided, you know what, it's probably ain't for me. Let me just move on to something else.
It's something that you feel more inclined to do because it seemed like you just felt more of a pull towards the public health. So you did a thesis and your thesis was titled, "Is Environmental Tobacco Smoke Associated with Asthma Morbidity in Inner City African American Children," right? So this is your thesis. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you ended up choosing this as your topic for your thesis?
Sure. How did you find that? That's also, I'm just curious.
It is public knowledge, okay? It's on your CV. It's on your CV.
It's such a researcher. Okay, it's on my CV. Okay. But yeah, okay. So we go way back. All right. So for my master's program, I was accepted into the CDC, Centers for Disease Control RISE program, and it was housed at Johns Hopkins University and Kennedy Krieger Institute. So I got into that internship because, again, I started to realize that if I'm going to be successful, I have to be trained or get experience from like the top-notch places. So I learned that I need to like apply for things and just put myself out there. And then if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. So I applied for this program and it was a really competitive program. And actually, when I applied, I was actually on the waiting list. I didn't get accepted immediately. And then I think someone dropped out and then I was able to get in. So thankfully. So with that program, the program is designed actually for graduate public health students of color who want like mentorship and research experience in public health. So all the mentors that are in the RISE program are all like Johns Hopkins medical doctors or PhDs. So we would partner with one of us on one of their projects. And the end goal was either to like present at a conference or write a paper or something. So I was connected to Dr. Arlene Butt, who was the PI of a asthma morbidity study in Baltimore. And asthma morbidity was something that was interesting to me because, again, from my experience, I actually, when I was in high school, I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis. And most people don't know what that is, but it's like a lung disease. It kind of imitates asthma if it attacks your lungs, but sarcoidosis can attack anywhere. It can attack your skin, your face, your eyes, anywhere. But it attacked my lungs and it imitates asthma. So I had that when I was living in Jersey City. Then when I moved away from Jersey City into the suburbs, I was fine. I didn't have any like asthma exacerbations. My lungs were fine. We went to the doctor. Everything was clear. It was great. So I started to realize that, wait a minute, I wonder if my environment has to do with my health, because as soon as we moved away from this like inner city neighborhood and moved to the suburbs where there was more trees, more grass, more space, I was fine. So I mentioned that to the RISE program director, and she was like, you know, we will be perfect to work with, Arlene. I was connected to Dr. Butts, and it's funny, that was like in 2010, and me and her are still in contact. I was able to use her data for my master's thesis. So with my master's thesis, I examined asthma morbidity in African American children and environmental tobacco smoke. So we looked at parental smoking, because at the time they didn't like to use the term secondhand smoke. So environmental tobacco smoke was more of a better term because it covers not only people that are smoking around the child, but it also covers people that aren't necessarily living with the child that are smoking. It also covers pollution and environmental toxins that stay in the air and how that could all have an impact on children. So anyway, so I was able to use that data for my master's thesis. And one of the main findings was that, of course, parents that smoked cigarettes around their children, they're more likely to have children that were sent to the emergency room because of asthma attacks or asthma exacerbations. But another key thing that we found in my thesis was that parents who smoked were also parents who were highly stressed. And we kind of found that, okay, maybe the fact that they're highly stressed, smoking is a way for them to cope with that, to cope with these stressors of living in an urban environment. Also having a child who has a severe chronic illness, and maybe they're using cigarettes as a way to cope. But then indirectly that's affecting their child without realizing it. So that was the whole point of the thesis.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Was there anything in that work or in analyzing that data that you found shocking?
I wasn't necessarily too shocked, but what I did find, so the work that I did at Johns Hopkins actually shaped the rest of my career. Actually, I think that doing that work made me realize that I wanted to not only work directly with families and working with parents and children on how to prevent chronic illnesses and other types of illnesses that affect children. But then it also made me realize that public health wasn't enough for me. So being an epidemiologist and crunching numbers all day wasn't enough. I wanted to actually be in the community, talking directly to parents and children, but then also understanding how mental health can have a direct impact on physical health as it pertains to children. Because I do think that was a shocking thing to me, that the health of parents can have a direct impact on the people living in their household without them realizing it, without anybody, it's all indirect. Parents aren't purposely trying to get their children sick, but just the behaviors that are forced on parents because they're stressed and low-income urban environments and they're forced to live in conditions that they have no control over, that in itself can have a detrimental effect on children. So I knew I wanted to be more involved, and just writing papers and presenting at conferences wasn't enough for me. Like, I needed to do more. So I think that in itself is what made me want to go into more of a clinical route.
Got it. And how did you fall into your post-bac program? Because you did some post-bac pre-health work.
Yeah. So I did. I've done so much. So
you have. I said it in the beginning. I'm like, how was I blessed with your presence?
Yes. Thank you. I'm just one of those people that just think about doing something and I just try to do it. And then if it doesn't work out, I just move on to something else. But I am happy that I'm in a career that I love and I'm settled. But I'm sure that back then, people thought that I was like all over the place. They thought that I was probably crazy.
But now it all came full circle and it's making sense. So let's go back. You were working on your master's, and during your master's or after your master's was when you started the internship?
No, during my master's. So it was the summer of going into my second year of my master's.
Okay, so going into the second year of your master's, that's when you started working at Johns Hopkins. Okay, good.
So it was a summer internship, but then after the summer, they ended up extending it for the whole year. So I was working with my mentor at Hopkins remotely after I left Maryland and came back to New York. To backtrack, a month before I went away to Hopkins, my father passed away from a heart attack. So after he passed away, I then realized, okay, I'm in the right place. I'm in public health. I really want to figure out a way to prevent things like this that happened to my dad from happening to anyone else. And so health was something that was in my mind. Then when I was at Hopkins, I realized, okay, I want to work directly with families and youth. So after that, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what is my next step? People kept telling me, like my mentor at Hopkins was telling me, you should be a medical doctor. I think you would be a great medical doctor. Like, you're really passionate. You really care about the community. We need more people like you to be in the forefront. So I figured, okay, because I want to work with children and families and have like a more direct connection with providing education to families. So I applied for post-bac programs. And for most people that don't know, post-bac pre-med programs are typically programs that for students who have a bachelor's degree and don't necessarily have prerequisites for medical school. So you get into these post-bac programs, you take your prerequisites, you take the MCAT. Some programs waive the MCAT, but most of them you take the MCAT. And if your post-bac is associated with the medical school and you do really well, you have a really good GPA, you have a really good MCAT, you automatically get into the medical school that's associated with the post-bac. So for me, I got into University of Pennsylvania and I got into Columbia, but Columbia was way too expensive. So I was like, okay, let me just, and these post-bac programs don't provide any scholarships, nothing. So I decided, let me just move out of New York and go to Philly. So I did Penn's program for a year. And I absolutely hated it. And not saying that I hated Penn. I think Penn was a great institution. But I think when I got to the program, that's when diversity started to make more sense to me. I was the only Black person in a sea of maybe 60 white students. It was my first time ever being in a institution where it was so apparent that I was a minority.
So you did 1 year of the post-bac program. Mm-hmm. And that's when you were like, no, not going to do this.
Yeah. So even while I was in the program, I was becoming more aware of just my place, just as a Black woman in this space. But then also just taking the classes, I just realized, you know what, I'm not really into all of this stuff. Like, I was doing well in the classes. I finished the program, but I wasn't happy. When I realized that I was starting to live my life for people, because people kept telling me, you should be a medical doctor, go be a medical doctor, go do this, go do that. They make so much money and blah, blah, blah. And I just realized, like, I don't necessarily care that much about the money. When I thought about my dad and how my dad said, just think about what your passion is and just be the best at it. Just that's it. The money will come, but just be the best at it. And I realized, like, being a medical doctor is great. I admire them. I have friends who are medical doctors. They're amazing, but you have to really be into that. That has to be a calling on your life to do that. And I realized at the time, it just wasn't for me. So after that, I did some soul searching. I left Philly, came back to Jersey, worked for about a year or two. And then I decided, I think what happened was I had a conversation with one of my mentors, and she asked me, what would you do for free? And that brings you so much joy. And I told her, working with people, talking to people, counseling people. I would love to do that. Actually being able to counsel people, and not just mental health issues, but also physical health, and just advocating for the rights of youth and children, making sure they have healthy outcomes. And she was like, what field do you think you would best fit in that would allow you to do that work? And I was like, I think, social work may allow me to do that. So I knew one social worker, and she seemed to be doing really well. So I said, okay, let me apply for a social work program. So I applied for a social work program. I applied to only one, and that was at NYU. And I got in with a scholarship. And
of course you did.
I thank God. Because I told God, I said, God, look, you got me all over the place. I'm going to medical school, law school. What do you want me to do? Like,
you are literally the definition of that meme where it's like, nobody, Black woman. You know what? I'm going to get another degree. You are the definition of that.
God, what do I need to do? So, I was just in my heart to do social work. But the thing about social work was that I was getting a lot of pushback from people about going into social work. So people talk so badly about social workers and how they don't make money and how it's not a reputable field and it's not prestigious and blah, blah, blah. So I had to make a decision. I need to go where God wants me to go and where I'm going to do the best work at. I applied to one program that was NYU. I didn't tell anybody. I applied. I got it on a scholarship. And then I also got funding through this new program that they had just launched, like the year that I applied, for social work students who are interested in merging behavioral health and physical health. I mean, it was perfect for me. So I applied for that and I got it. And that's how I knew, like, you know what, this is where I'm meant to be. Like, everything is aligning into place. And I got in. It was an accelerated program. So I did 16 months in that program. And, and I loved it. I really have no regrets. I love my social work degree so much. And I love the fact that I can combine social work with public health.
Right. Because your concentration was integrated primary and behavioral health. So what exactly does that mean? Like, how did that apply to your degree?
It's really just teaching social work students and clinicians, rather, how to identify the connection between our mental health and our bodies and our physical health. So being able to work with clients and not just talk necessarily about symptoms of like anxiety and depression, but how that manifests in your body. So how anxiety can actually lead you to engage in certain behaviors that will be detrimental to your health, like maybe overeating or maybe not eating enough, or engaging in behaviors like substance use or risky sexual behaviors that's now connected to abuse, to STIs, to heart disease, diabetes, and so forth, all because your mental health wasn't in order and wasn't in place. Now your physical health is now being impacted as well. Or vice versa, how your physical health, but having chronic disease, can now lead you to exhibit depressive symptoms. So as someone who's living with a chronic disease, you may not feel the need or feel motivated to take medication or to engage in preventive methods because you're depressed, or you're feeling anxious about something, or you have mistrust of the government or your doctor, who, whatever it is. And understanding, if you treat your mental health and you're in a place where you're emotionally and mentally safe, you can now address other things and other barriers that can now make you feel healthy and holistically. So that's really was what that training was about. And it was perfect for me because I had this public health degree that I wanted to utilize. And I was trying to figure out, how can I utilize this degree in social work? And then this program came about. So it really kind of like just added to the knowledge that I already knew.
So did that program end up leading you to pursue family science and health development as a PhD?
Somewhat. So what that program did was it placed me in an internship to work with women who have had co-occurring disorders. So mental health and substance use disorders. And the women that I primarily worked with when I was in my internship at NYU were primarily Black women. So I knew that I wanted to do stuff with Black people. But then what really led me to family science was my second job after my MSW, which was a youth and family therapist. this. And it's funny because when I got the job as a youth and family therapist, I was actually working with youth who were involved in the criminal justice system. And I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to relate to them or how comfortable I'll be working with them. But oh my gosh, like I loved that job. I loved the youth that I worked with, and it just made me look at youth and teenagers so differently. A lot of times when we hear about children or teenagers get arrested or get caught up in the criminal justice system, we're often labeling them as criminals and we adultify them instead of like realizing that these are actually kids. They have colds, they cry for nothing. These are children. So when I was in the field as a therapist, it really allowed me to take away this label of them as being juveniles and criminals and robbers, whatever society labeled them, and just seeing them for who they are.
Yeah. And my question to you, so I just want to make sure I'm getting the correct timeline right. So you said you were a youth and family therapist. Was that part of your internship?
No, that was
okay. So you were working as a youth and family therapist while working on your internship?
No, after I graduated. My internship was during my master's.
Okay, so the internship is during your master's, and you have full ride for this master's program, right?
Well, not a full ride. It was like a 50% scholarship.
Okay, so you have 50% scholarship for this master's, and you have an internship. Was the internship paid for, or it was just part of the program?
Yeah, it was paid. It was a part of the integrated primary and behavioral health program, but they provided stipends for the students that were accepted into that program. And it was just 5 of us. So they provided $10,000 for the year or something like that.
That's nice for, going and getting the master's and them paying you some money. So then once you're done with the master's, you work as a youth and family therapist. So what was the process of being able to become a therapist post-master's?
Well, I was working somewhere else. I worked in an administrative role, a supportive housing program for foster care youth for a few months after I graduated. But I wanted to do more clinical work. So I took the licensing exam. And then what happened was I got an offer for this job, for this youth and family therapist job while I was doing my master's, like literally like the month before I graduated. And I turned them down because the pay wasn't that great. I got another offer and the pay was better. So I ended up taking the other offer that paid me better, which was the assistant director job at a supportive housing agency. So they told me, they said, look, if you want to come to us, we'll love to have you. But if you want to take the other job, it's fine. So I was at the other job. After a couple of months, I didn't really like it. I wanted to do more clinical work. I ended up emailing them and saying, hey, I hope you guys remember me from like 6 months ago, but I want to do more clinical work. I want to transition. Do you have any openings? And they were like, yes, we remember you. Absolutely. Please come on down. So I came down. I interviewed with them like a couple of days later. They offered me a job on the spot. Like God places me in really great positions. Mm-hmm. And because of that job, I've never done family therapy before. Like it was my first time actually doing therapy with families and youth. So that gave me so much insight to the dynamics of family and just the dynamic of just how much influence not only the family has, but the environment has on the child too. So even though I knew there was a connection from just my internship at Hopkins, I knew there was a connection between children and their parents, but then actually going into the community, doing counseling in the house and houses, because we did all our counseling sessions in the house of our clients. So actually just seeing their environment, seeing where they had to live day by day and the barriers that they had to face. And then also seeing the behaviors of their parents and the ideologies of their parents and just the experiences of their parents, especially like generational trauma, racial trauma, and how that all affects children and the decisions that they make. It really led me to want to now pursue this career in family science. I wanted to learn more about how can we, especially Black families, highlight the strengths of Black families.
And you felt like by pursuing a PhD, that would allow you to transition into that?
Absolutely. I love social work and being a clinician and stuff, but I felt like I needed more. I need to have more power over my field. And I wanted to be able to be in a position where I'm changing the narrative of Black families as a whole in my research and in my practice as well, and the policy world and all that. And I knew that getting a PhD would allow me to do that, but also it would allow me to educate future social workers. So educating future social workers on how to center Black families or minority families as well, just centering them, highlighting their strengths and changing the narrative and the way that they're portrayed in research so that we can create more culturally centered and culturally relevant programs that could actually improve their outcomes. So I knew that a PhD would allow me to do all of that and more.
And how was pursuing a PhD for you? How was your PhD world?
Yeah, so it's funny. It went by really fast. I finished in 3 years, but it wasn't planned. It was difficult. I mean, I had great advisors. I had great faculty. I had great mentors. A lot of my success comes from mentorship and the importance of just me being able to seek out great mentors that were able to guide me. But it was difficult because I was in a predominantly white school, and I'm one of those people that I'm trying to be the best of the best. I'm going by what my father told me. So I'm not thinking about anybody else. I'm planning out my future and thinking about how do I do what I have to do in this program so that I could be marketable when I graduate, but then also be in the position where I could actually influence change over this field. So in the program, I was blessed to get like lots of awards and recognition from, faculty. But with that brought up a lot of jealousy. I had a lot of classmates who were really jealous of me, like literally report me to my advisor, to the PhD director, and just say all kinds of crazy things about me. And with those things, they tried to distract me. But I had to realize that a lot of it was this noise. A lot of it was the devil's attempt to distract me from the end goal. I had to just keep my eyes on the prize and just keep it moving. So there were nights where I wouldn't sleep. I was working 20 times harder than everybody else, just trying to be recognized and to stay on the course. I dealt with a lot of anxiety during my PhD. I wasn't sleeping well. Like, it was a lot. It really had a toll on my mental health. But thankfully, I graduated. I'm in a much better place now, so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, it was a really difficult time, but then it was also a very blessed time. Like I said, I had a lot of favor with professors and advisors and so forth. I had a lot of support from them. It was just the little demons that would just come and just try to
take you off your block. Yeah. So as far as like your dissertation goes, though, you did a dissertation exploring the roles of social support, ethnic identity, and psychological empowerment on drug use and sexual risk behavior among Black and Hispanic female adolescents. If you can give us an overview of exactly what you found for your dissertation work, that would be amazing.
So one of the things, just to take a step back to why I'm even interested in Black and Hispanic girls. So one of the things that I found when I was a youth and family therapist before I got into my PhD program was that I was constantly working with girls, primarily Black and Hispanic girls. They were my clients. And I saw my little sisters in them because I have two younger sisters. There's a huge age gap. So my sister is 13 and 10. So I saw my sisters in these girls. And one of the struggles that I noticed that a lot of the girls were dealing with were engaging in like risky sex just so they could please their partners, using drugs, and because they were dealing with issues of self-esteem, anxiety, trying to please their partners, trying to please their friends, and just dealing with really challenging situations, but then overall just not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy enough, not really understanding that their worth as Black girls. So I knew that that was something that I wanted to change for not just them, but for all Black girls in the world. I never want to see a Black girl feel like she has to engage in a behavior that's detrimental to her health just so she could be accepted, or do these behaviors because she feels like this is what you're supposed to do as a Black girl. You're supposed to just run around having sex with anybody you see so you could be accepted. I never wanted a girl to feel like that. And it's mainly because I see my sisters and these girls. So I don't want my sisters to go through that. So this was something that I wanted to dedicate my career to making sure that I empower young Black girls. So for my PhD, I was blessed to work in a research lab that did community-based work in Patterson. And the work that we did focused heavily on HIV prevention and drug use prevention amongst ethnic minority youth. And Patterson is an urban community in New Jersey, predominantly Black and Hispanic. So a lot of the youth that I worked with as a PhD student were Black and Hispanic teenagers. So in addition to me analyzing data, writing papers and so forth, I also did community work where I would volunteer at soup kitchens and homeless shelters and health fairs on the weekends and facilitate interventions, things that you wouldn't necessarily consider research. But I'm grateful that I did those things because it kind of showed me the importance of engaging in communities. So within that work, we were able to collect data that I was able to use my dissertation specifically on these type of outcomes, on sexual risk behavior and drug use amongst youth. So because my focus was on Black girls, I didn't want to have a study that was comparing Black and Hispanic girls to Black and Hispanic boys. I wanted to be solely grounded on girls.
Mm-hmm. And what did you all find?
So I looked at protective factors. And the literature with sexual health and drug use literature is always so negative. So I wanted to paint a really nice positive picture on it. So what we found and my dissertation was that girls who have this higher sense of empowerment, have high levels of ethnic identity, have higher levels of social support are less likely to engage in sexual risk behavior and drug use. And that they had lower levels of 30-day drug use and sexual risk behaviors and so forth. So with those findings, I wanted to just kind of highlight the strengths within Black and Hispanic girls and also with their families, because these young girls who had these high levels of social support from their families, peers, teachers, and so forth, and also high levels of ethnic identity that were nurtured by their families and their community, were less likely to engage in risky behaviors. So I look at my findings as the future. Takes me to the future step of creating interventions that could foster empowerment and ethnic identity and support amongst Black and Hispanic girls, mainly, so that to reduce the likelihood of engaging in those type of behaviors.
Just out of my curiosity, what exactly does social support look like for these young girls?
So with the scale that we used, it measured, or it asked rather, if you need help from a parent, a mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your peers, your teachers, how helpful do you think they would be? So on like a scale where I think it's like 0 to 4, 4 being the highest scale or so forth. If you had higher scores of like an average mean of 3 and up, that means you saw that these supportive structures were highly helpful, right? The thing about quantitative research is that that's all you know, right? You don't really know what does it look like. When you say helpful, what exactly does that mean? Does helpful mean you're giving me more money, emotional support? So what exactly does that mean? So the next steps of my dissertation is to look more at qualitative research, to actually talk to girls and actually ask them, what does support mean to you? Because we need to know that so that we can be able to create interventions that actually foster support. And that's the beauty of mixed methods research, I think, because you get the quantitative numbers, but then qualitatively, you're able to actually hear the words from our participants so that we could be able to effectively guide these interventions so that it's catered to this population.
And you pursued a career of research beyond your PhD. So do you have any final words of encouragement or advice for anyone who is interested in pursuing a career in research that you would like to share?
I just think that people should just follow their passion. I see so many people following what's cool, researchers following the hottest trends and trying to attach themselves to people that are publishing a lot. It doesn't really work. It's really, you know it just as a doctor of chemistry, you understand that if you're not passionate about writing these papers and doing these experiments, it's not going to get done. It's just because it's really time consuming and mentally draining work. So I think that I would advise people that if you want to get into a field of research, just think about what do you want your impact to be? What population do you care about? And why do you care about that population? Why do you care about Black girls if you're a white woman or a man or whatever, whatever it is, and you can. I'm not necessarily saying that white people can't care about Black girls, but I think people have to reflect and think about why do I care about this population and what do I want the impact of my work to be? I think when you identify your passion, you're able to really do meaningful research that will actually improve the outcomes of an entire community. And I think that's what we should all be doing as researchers in general.
I agree so much. So I want to thank you so much for being here on the podcast. You are amazing, and I just can't wait to see how you continue to roll out your work.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me and even having this platform. Thank you for highlighting the voices or uplifting the voices of women in research. It's amazing.
If you want to connect with Dr. Ijeoma Opara, our Great Sisters website link is in the show notes. You can also connect with her on social media. She is also on Instagram at Dr.Ijeoma.Opara. If you want to connect with me, I am at The Research Her on the socials. And also you can catch me at theresearchher.com. And until next time, I'll holla.